Dau cuvântul doamnei Maria Iacu.
This is the final presentation for today. I know you're all tired after lunch, so Pavel was luckier than me, giving the last presentation before lunch. Laura, I don't know why you like Pavel more than me, but anyway, I'll try to be short. You've probably realized by now that we have been talking too much about data today, and not only today. You've been hearing this word for the last decade or so, maybe too much. You've been hearing about geospatial data, statistical data, educational data, and they're also described with some fancy words like open and linked data and things like that. So it is true that whenever you come across the word data, it usually refers to numbers. And if you have not done so already, do browse the national data portal, the data.gov.ro, or the European data portal, and you'll find out that most of the open data that are available there are actually Excel files filled with numbers, sometimes with lists and things like that. And this is no surprise. You've probably also heard that data are described as the oil of the 21st century because value is hidden in them. They can be exploited to produce economic growth for Europe, for each individual country. But today, what we're interested in is not numbers, it's instead language. It's the words, the sentences, the phrases in our languages that we use every day, we humans, to interact with each other. And we would like to use this human language to interact also with the computer. Actually, the machine translation is a type of human-to-machine interaction scenario. So value is hidden not only in numbers, but also in words, in sentences, in texts. And this is why we're here today. This is actually one of the reasons we're here today, to convince you that language data that you produce in your public bodies are very valuable for the language technology community, and especially in the field of machine translation, because they can help us make better language processing tools, and especially make better automated translation tools. So, if we were to define data as any piece of electronically stored content, then the data we are interested in are language or textual data, and this can be defined as any piece of electronically stored text. And in the context of translation, this text can be any text in Romanian or in any language, EU language or Icelandic or Norwegian, and preferably accompanied by its equivalent in another European language, such as this example. This is, I hope, a correct translation of the Romanian sentence into its English equivalent. So, if you produce these types of texts in your organizations, this is actually what we would be interested in. Such pairs of sentences and texts have been used for many years now, and they have fed the machine translation system of the European Commission, what was previously known as MTITC, and now as presented earlier, e-translation and self-automated translation. You know that there are thousands of translators and interpreters working for the European Commission. All the data they produce are fed into the machine translation system, and not only by the Commission's employees, but also from translators of other EU bodies, such as the European Investment Bank. So it is quite a huge amount of language data that the European Commission has used and is using to train their e-translation system. However, they are not enough. One of the reasons that they are not enough is that, as you can imagine, they are narrowed to what is sometimes called the Euro jargon, the language, the administrative language and regulatory language that is mainly produced by the European bureaucracy. So when it comes to translating other types of texts in different domains, then e-translation could not perform so well as it does when it translates European directives and legislation and things like that. This is why the European Commission actually financed ELRC. This is why this workshop is taking place, because we are trying all together to collect texts from the national administrations that will help their system to better address the national needs. So to better translate the types of texts and the domains in which you regularly work in your public sector bodies. So I'm going to try to give you a bit more examples of what actually we're looking for and what you could contribute to ELRC if you work with these types of texts. As I said earlier, any text that you have stored in your computers. Ideally, this text should be in any European language, plus Icelandic and Norwegian, and its equivalent to another language, such as this language pair, Romanian, and translation in English. Could be a list of terms if you work in a specified domain and you use terminologies. Any list in whichever format would be extremely useful. Now, what file formats could we use and can you contribute? Anything, in principle. It's just a fact that some file formats are more ready to be used in an automated translation system than others. So, for example, you could have this type of text. Actually, this is a scanned page of I think this is the Constitution of Romania. Can we process it? Can we do something with it? Yes, we can. We would have, for example, to apply optical character recognition, but this step alone would introduce some mistakes to the output. So we don't have to put it away, we can use it, but it's not our preference. It's not ideal for the type of job we're trying to accomplish. But these are our preferred file formats. If you have bilingual or multilingual texts, then these files, in descending order of preference, are what you could contribute to ELRC. These are translation memories, TMX files, which are outputs of translation memory software, any XML-based files, such as XClif, but plain text and spreadsheets are also okay if you store your translations in such file formats. For terminologies, the preferred file format is the TBX, and then again plain text and spreadsheets, and plain text is okay for any monolingual text. In the following slides, I talked about TMX, XLIF and TBX. It is very possible that these are unknown words to you. Unless you're a professional translator, we don't expect that you work with these file formats. So you probably work with a word processor, Microsoft Office Word or something like that, and you store your texts in doc files. Absolutely okay. We're not here to convince you to change your daily workflows. We're just trying to make the most out of what is already available in your archives. I'm going to provide some hints and tips or some good practices that you could adopt. Again, I need to emphasize that I'm not trying to convince you to change your daily workflows. Just, if possible, to avoid some practices that, according to our experience so far, are sometimes adopted. So we have seen some text translated in this way. So someone could translate in the same file with the original text and tries to have one paragraph of the source text and then the paragraph with the target text and so on and so forth. This is not something that can be considered good practice, or this isn't either. I mean, here the person who contributed the text tried to optically align the source and the target text, and even inserted white spaces so that one sentence is aligned optically with the other one. It's okay when you are human, you can very easily see which sentence is the equivalent of the other one, but this is not okay when you're a machine and trying to learn from examples of human text. All this, it's okay, but it's not ideal. Instead, it is considered a good practice to always keep your source and target text in different files. When you have all your files, source and target, in one folder, try to name each pair with the same file name. So you have name whatever, give the same name whatever to the target text, and distinguish your files by inserting language identifiers. So even after 5 or 10 years, when you revisit your old archives with translations, you know which file is the actual translation of another file. You wouldn't have to guess or anything or open many files to find out what you had translated 10 years earlier. As you can see here, as an example, I have created a folder with 10 pairs of documents. You can contribute to ELRC, if possible, whatever is available and whatever you think you can contribute, even if it is just one document. The truth, however, is that one document with, let's say, 4 pages will not make a difference, because machine translation systems need too many data to perform better, and especially neural machine translation systems need millions of sentences, millions of examples, so that they can be trained of them and produce good automatic translation output. So ideally, you could group together a number of your data files to compile a group of data files, what we call a data set or a language resource. And when you group them together, please keep in mind 2 criteria according to which you can make this grouping. One of them is, of course, the language or the languages that this data set or group of files contains, and do indicate it in the name of this data set. For example, collection of text in English, Romanian. If it also contains French, put French in the folder title, say, in the dataset title, and the domain. This is very important because the European Commission's machine translation system needs to adapt better to the specificities of different domains. So, for example, they are building different machine translation engines for the law domain, and another one for the agricultural domain. This is, of course, because the terminology is different in each domain, and the language, the registry is different, and so on. So, do indicate the domain also in your collection of data, of files. And what are these domains we are looking for? Earlier today, you heard about the Connecting Europe facility that supports digital services infrastructures. These are services, digital services or platforms or web portals that are created by the Connecting Europe facility and provided freely to all EU member states and to other European projects. Some or most of these digital services infrastructures have already integrated e-translation to automatically translate their content. And this is why we need e-translation to work better for these DSIs, digital service infrastructures. And what are these? The online dispute resolution, the electronic exchange of social security information, e-procurement, the e-justice portal that was presented earlier today, so together with e-codex. So this e-justice portal that is also used here in Romania is automatically translated by e-translation. If we want the Romanian part of the e-justice portal to produce better Romanian translations, then we have to feed it with texts in English and Romanian in the justice domain. E-health, the business registers interconnection system, safer internet, cybersecurity, public open data, again it was presented today, and Europeana, presented earlier today. Europeana already reuses e-translation, maybe not very successfully, but this is exactly because it needs more data so that the European Commission can train the dedicated machine translation engine in the culture domain. Once they have the right data and the right amount of data to train such an engine, Europeana will perform better in all European languages. I hope by now that I have convinced you that it is worth the effort, and the effort is not really huge. It's actually minimal. We try to keep it minimal on your side. And I'm going to present the very few steps that you have to take if you can share a part of the data that you produce in your public body. As Stelios mentioned earlier, this can be done through a dedicated repository that we are have developed and maintaining, the ELRC share. So just type in this address and you get in. But you have to be a registered user to be able to contribute data through the repository. So just click on the top menu here, register, We will ask you for some necessary personal details, your name, your organization and your email, that's all. You have to, of course, accept the terms, and then you are ready to contribute your first resource. This is done by filling in a very simple form, in which actually you have only to provide a title for the dataset that you are contributing, to indicate which languages it includes, and to provide a very short description, like in the examples I presented earlier, a collection of Romanian English texts in the culture domain. That could be enough. From the Ministry of Culture. How you can send to us the actual texts, your actual data. You have three options, as you can see here. Either produce a zip file with your group of documents and upload it, or have them stored in your organization's FTP server, for example, and provide us the FTP or URL address, and we can get them from there. Or if your organization has already developed an e-delivery access point, I'm looking at you because I'm trying to understand if anyone is already using e-delivery. It is one, again, of the Connecting Europe facility infrastructures. It's a building block, and every public organization in Europe can install and use it for secure transfer of documents. So the most common scenario is that two ministries in the same country or cross-border to communicate with a ministry from a different country have an e-delivery access point, and if there are any sensitive documents that they need to send or receive, they don't just email it, they email them, but they use the e-delivery building block to send them in a more trusted and secure way. So if you feel that you have some documents but you're not sure that it is very secure to upload them or just provide the URL, and you prefer a safer way to do it, and of course if you have e-delivery in your organization, you can use it. Okay, you have a zip file with documents that you have selected. Just click on upload, you indicate where this file is located on your machine, and click on submit. The second alternative, just provide us with the address on an FTP server or whatever that your data reside, and we'll get them for you. And don't log out, just contribute a second data set. When done, log out. So I think this is very simple. It's basically 3 steps: register, complete, fill in the contribution form, upload your zip file, and that's it. Still, if you have any questions, there is a help page with guidelines on what you should do. And if still you have questions, you can always email us. So what has happened by now? This is you, and these are your valuable files with Romanian and English text, and you have contributed them to ELRC share. What happens after this database? It says here that ELRC processes your data. A processed version of your data is produced, and then this is again re-uploaded to the repository and forwarded to the European Commission as ready-to-use files. Because in the commonest cases, people throughout Europe, like you from public sector bodies, don't contribute machine translation ready files. It's like those that I described earlier, TPX or TMX. They usually contribute a TXT, a doc file, a PDF file, or something like that. So this is actually what processes your data means. It means that from whatever you contribute, we apply the necessary process steps so that we transform it to a format that is ready to be used for training the e-translation system. And let me give you some examples. Your data may contain some person's names and needs anonymization. We can perform that with automated ways. It may need cleaning. For example, it can contain pictures or HTML tags because you copied it from your organization's public website. Of course, in most cases, it will need reformatting. So, for example, a doc file will be converted to a TMX file. Tag removal, I said earlier. Alignment. Alignment in our jargon, in the language technology, means that we make, we indicate which sentence, which segment in a text is the equivalent of which sentence in the other text. So actually, we make two sentences aligned. And we will describe your dataset, fully describe your dataset with metadata. After all these, or whichever processing steps are needed, are applied to your documents, if, for example, you contributed a collection of TXT, doc files, PDF files, what usually comes out of this after applying all these documents is this, which is a small snippet of a very simply structured TMX file. In these TMX files, there's a sentence in English, as indicated here, and its Romanian equivalent here, and there follows another pair of an English and a Romanian sentence. This file format is ready to be imported in the e-translation database with training data. So this is a file that is ready to train e-translation. And after we complete the metadata of your contributed, of your donated dataset, how it will look like on the public site of the ELRC share. Maybe I forgot to mention that the ELRC share also can be used for browsing what is already available. And you can also browse it and see what other countries have contributed. And maybe you will also be able to identify there some datasets that you can use. So this is how it will look like. There's the title, there are the attribution details, a small description, distribution details. For example, this resource has been available under a CC by SA license, which means that it can be freely reused as long as it is the IPR holder is attributed, and if you reuse it and you redistribute it, you have to give it also away under the same conditions. It means that you cannot change this if you take it and give it to someone else. You have to share it again with the CC by SA license. The languages, the linguality type, the format of the text in there, the number of words, who funded it, how it was created, who created the metadata. So here is done to fish again, and so on. Let me quickly browse through again these processing steps that can be applied to your data. So data extraction, anonymization, cleaning, reformatting, conversion, tag removal, alignment, and metadata completion. And I repeated them because all these processing tasks can also be applied in your office if you feel that your data should not get out of your office in their current form. We can come to your premises, apply whatever processing is needed, of course, with you, selecting the data with you, and take back only the part of the data that can be shared. This is, of course, a free service provided by ELRC to all public bodies in Europe. An expert will come to your office and help you identify your needs and then apply the processing that is needed. Diagram, because I want to emphasize this dashed yellow arrow that takes the processed version of your data and not only uploads it back to the repository, but it gives it back to you as well if you actually think that ELRC can help you transform your data, textual data files, then whatever is the output of this transformation, it's not only us that will be able to use it, you will be able to use it as well, because your transformed data will remain for you to use in future tasks. How to do this? There's an online form available on our website, so just fill this in, describe very briefly what you think your need is, and we'll get back to you to arrange for our visit or whatever will be needed. As mentioned earlier, there's a help desk that is reachable by phone, Skype, with a web forum or email, of course. And you can reach to us to ask anything, any type of question. For example, if you're not sure that your data relative are appropriate for ELRC, if you can share them, what's their legal status. So whatever concerns you, we're there to answer it. That was the last one. Is this correct actually?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Perfect.
Mulțumesc. Mulțumesc.